It was one of those days at the office when the stress felt like a weight on my shoulders, the ambition for something greater clashing with the reality that corporate life often isn't fair. I had been at the company for over 5 years, gradually working my way up. I was hardworking, driven, and I knew I deserved a promotion. Yet, there was always someone else who seemed to reach the goal before me. Now, my opportunity seemed closer than ever, but it came with a complication. That complication had a name: Mr. Hendrick. He was 30, charming, and possessed an energy that was hard to describe but even harder to ignore. Mr. Hendrick had a way of capturing attention effortlessly. There was a particular look he gave me during meetings, the way his gaze lingered longer than necessary. It wasn't lost on me, in fact. It had been going on for months. The glances, the compliments, the subtle touches on my shoulder as he walked by, and the way he spoke my name, soft, almost like a whisper. I kept convincing myself it was all in my imagination. But one day, after a particularly tough day at work, he called me into his office. His tone was light, but the expression in his eyes suggested this was no ordinary meeting. As I entered, my heart raced, a mix of nerves and excitement swirling inside me. He gestured for me to sit, and I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes moved over me, assessing every detail. There was a charged energy in the air, a tension you could almost touch. "Cassie," he started, his voice low and smooth, "you've been doing outstanding work lately. I've noticed, and I think it's time we discuss your future here." This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. But something in his tone, in the way he leaned in slightly, told me this wasn't going to be a simple talk about my career. "You know," he went on, his eyes never leaving mine, "in this field it's not just about working hard, it's also about relationships, about making connections. Do you understand what I mean?" I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. "I see a lot of potential in you, Cassie. You could go far, very far," he said, trailing off as he stood up, moving around his desk to stand beside me. I could feel the warmth of his body nearby, the scent of his cologne filling the room. But I managed to whisper, struggling to find my voice. He leaned down, his lips dangerously close to my ear. "Sometimes, to get where you want to go, you have to be willing to give a little, to take chances, to let down your guard," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. His hand brushed my shoulder, the touch light but loaded with meaning. I knew exactly what he was suggesting. And while part of me recognized the situation for what it was, another part, a part one couldn't deny, felt drawn to him, intrigued even. "Are you willing to take that risk, Cassie?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his hand slowly moving down my arm. I turned to face him, meeting his gaze directly. There was no turning back. The tension between us was too intense, too potent to ignore. I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face, one that made my heart race even faster. "Good," he said softly, his voice filled with satisfaction. As I tried to make sense of what was happening, he kissed me, his lips firm and insistent. I felt myself giving in, melting into the warmth of his body. His hands found their way to my waist, pulling me closer as I wrapped my arms around his neck. It felt like all the tension, all the unspoken desire between us had reached its breaking point. The heat between us grew, his touch becoming more urgent, his hands exploring every inch of my body with a hunger that matched my own. There was something intoxicating about the way he touched me, how he made me feel wanted, craved. It was as if the rest of the world faded away, leaving just this moment, this powerful connection between us. He lifted me onto his desk, his hands sliding up my thighs as he kissed me with a passion that stole my breath. I felt the firm press of his desire against me and let out a soft moan before I could stop myself. His hands roamed my body, teasing and igniting a need that I had never experienced before. Yet, amidst all the heat and urgency, there was something more than just physical desire in the air. There was a chemistry between us that went beyond mere attraction. I sensed it in the way he looked at me, in how his touch felt both demanding and attentive. It was as if we had been moving toward this moment all along, as if every look and every interaction had been building up to this point. He drew back slightly, breathing heavily as he gazed down at me, his eyes darkened with desire. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low and rough. I nodded, my heart pounding. "Yes," I whispered, so quietly it was almost lost between us. That was all he needed. He kissed me again, harder this time, his hands working to unbutton my blouse, his fingers brushing against my skin, sending chills down my spine. I moaned softly, arching into him as he kissed down my neck, leaving a trail of heat in his wake. The next moments felt like an eternity, a whirlwind of passion and longing as we gave in to the moment, surrendering to the desire that had simmered between us for so long. I found myself laid out on his desk, my legs spread wide as he thrust inside me with a firm push, a blend of pain and pleasure making me moan. One of his hands wrapped around my neck, applying pressure as he moved quickly and forcefully, doing everything he could to ruin me for that promotion. There was no turning back. This was happening, and stopping it seemed impossible, even if I had wanted to. After what felt like hours, we finally pulled away, both of us panting, our bodies still trembling from the intensity of the encounter. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher: desire, yes, but also something deeper, more profound. "Cassie," he murmured, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've wanted this for so long. You have no idea." I met his gaze, my heart still racing. "Me too," I whispered, hardly able to believe what had just unfolded between us. He smiled, a genuine, gentle smile that made my heart skip a beat. "I'm going to make sure you get that promotion, Cassie. You deserve it," his words echoed in my mind as I stood there, breathless, my heart pounding. "You deserve it," he had said. But this moment had become more than just about the promotion. It felt like a promise, an unspoken understanding. As I met his gaze, I sensed something deeper, stirring feelings I had tried so hard to keep buried. The silence between us was thick with the weight of what had happened, but his gaze held me, grounding me in the moment. He stepped closer, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was both gentle and commanding, as if he were marking a boundary that we had never dared to cross before. "Cassie," said, my name rolling off his tongue with a softness. "This doesn't have to end here." My breath hitched, my lips parting slightly as I struggled to find the right words, to process the whirlwind of emotions inside me. His intense gaze held a hunger that made me feel both nervous and exhilarated. I had never seen him like this, vulnerable, exposed, yet still exuding a powerful presence. "I don't want it to," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper, but the sincerity in my words lingered between us. A slow, knowing smile spread across his lips as he cupped my cheek, leaning in to brush his lips against mine once more. This time, the kiss was gentle and unhurried, as if he wanted to savor every moment, every sensation. I could sense the tension in his body, how he was holding back, waiting for me to give him the signal that this was truly what I wanted too. I kissed him back, my arms winding around his neck, pulling him closer, feeling the heat radiating from his body. His hum of approval vibrated through me, and I knew we had crossed a line we could never uncross, but I didn't care. I wanted this, I wanted him. As our kisses deepened, I felt the desire build again, the same fiery need that had consumed us before. His hands traveled down my back, pulling me closer, until there was no space left between us, his body solid and warm against mine. Every touch, every caress only fueled my craving for more. God, Cassie, he breathed, his voice rough with longing as his lips trailed down my neck. You have no idea what you do to me. I could feel both of us losing control as his hands continued to explore, slipping beneath the hem of my blouse, his touch setting my skin ablaze. I leaned into him, my hands gliding down his chest, feeling the firm muscles through his shirt, the strength I had always admired from afar, now something tangible under my fingertips. With surprising ease, he lifted me, pressing me back against the wall, his body pinning me in place as he kissed me harder, deeper. The air between us crackled with an almost unbearable energy, and I could feel the walls of professionalism we'd built over the years crumbling around us. We weren't boss and employee anymore, just two people caught in the throes of something we couldn't deny. His hand moved up my thigh, his touch slow and deliberate, sending waves of heat through me. Is this what you want? He asked, his voice thick with need, the intensity in his tone making my pulse race. Yes, I breathed, my voice shaking with anticipation. His hands grew more purposeful, as though each moment mattered, the urgency returning without haste, but with precision. And as he started to please me with his fingers, I found myself completely lost in the sensations he was creating, feeling a rush of wetness that matched the depth of my desire. Every touch, every gentle kiss he placed on my skin sent waves of pleasure surging through me. It was intense, all-consuming, and I found myself craving even more. He paused, pulling back just enough to meet my gaze, his breath coming in quick, heavy bursts. His thumb brushed softly over my lower lip, his eyes dark with longing. I've wanted this for so long, Cassie, he confessed, his voice raw with emotion. You have no idea how often I've thought about this about you. You're stunning, he whispered, awe evident in his tone. I felt a flush rise to my cheeks, my heart fluttering at the sincerity behind his words. This had grown beyond mere desire. There was something deeper between us, something unplanned yet undeniably real. He kissed me again, with more urgency this time, his hands exploring every part of me as we surrendered to the moment. The passion between us was unyielding, intensifying with each touch, each kiss, until it felt like we were both teetering on the edge of something uncontrollable. His grip tightened on my hips, pulling me closer, and I could feel the heat of his body, the strength of his desire pressing against me. Cassie, he murmured against my lips, his voice thick with need. I need you, his words only heightened my longing for him. Then, take me, I whispered back, my voice quivering with anticipation. That was all he needed. He kissed me with a fierce hunger, and soon I found myself on my knees, taking him in, responding to his every breath and murmur until he released, his warmth spilling over me. In that moment, as we gave in completely to the passion that had simmered between us for so long, I knew this was just the start, something neither of us had planned, but something we both desired more than anything. He pulled back slightly, his expression turning serious, though his eyes still burned with that familiar warmth and desire. We need to talk, he said gently, his hand remaining on my waist. I nodded but excused myself, saying I'd return in a few minutes. After washing my face, I came back, acutely aware of the weight of what lay ahead. I know, he said with a sigh, running a hand through his hair as if searching for the right words. I've wanted you for so long, Cassie, more than I ever allowed myself to admit. And now, I don't want this to be a one-time thing we just forget about. I want more. I wanted to believe him, to hope that we could navigate this, that we could blur the lines between work and personal life without repercussions. But deep down, I knew the reality people would gossip, rumors would spread, and whatever this was between us would always be scrutinized. I don't want to lose my job, I finally admitted, my voice trembling as the fear surfaced. He leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. You won't, I promise, he said with a conviction that soothed some of my anxiety, yet doubts lingered. I met his gaze, searching for something reassurance, a sign that everything would turn out fine. And in that moment, I found it the truth in his eyes. He meant every word, willing to take the risk and fight for whatever we had begun. And suddenly I realized I was ready to take that risk too. I took a deep breath, allowing my fear to fade, replaced by a calm determination. Okay, I said softly. Let's figure this out together. His smile grew, filled with relief and a hint of hope. He pulled me into his arms, holding me close, and for the first time a sense of peace settled over me. Whatever challenges awaited us, whatever complications might arise, we would face them as a team. Standing there in his office, the chaos of the outside world momentarily distant, I realized this wasn't about a promotion anymore. It was about us. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, right there with him.